officially. I have this burp I'm working on.
I just burped.
Just can't get it out. It's the worst. Okay, one sec before we'll peek behind the curtain stuff here. For the folks at home, I'm writing up little tickers I can display. We want to throw the title of the movie on that. 8. It's not even the right thing. 8. There we go. Let me drop an ethics bomb on you. There we go. Mother sucker. Come on. There we go. Throw it across phone. One second here. All right. Start recording now. All right. 3, 2. Well, it's here. Episode 200 of Crossing State Lines. I can't believe it, Dave. 200 episodes. It's been, I think, 3.5 years since we started this podcast. And now we're at 200. It took us about, I'm trying to think of, I think about 2+ years to get to 100. And it took us half that to get to 100 and half of that to get to 200. So really pumping out the episodes here.
Yeah, the pandemic gave us the opportunity to pump out more episodes, start trivia, come up with fun new ideas, and we have just been two men on a mission for the last year or so. I think we did we went over this once. I think we did 80 episodes last year. Something like that.
And that's maybe underselling it a little bit because I didn't record all of the sports trivias that we did, so it's likely more than that if you count all the trivias. But even if you don't, still pretty hefty output on our part. But yeah, it's been wild. As we tweeted earlier today, thank you to everybody who's been on here and watching and listening and all that fun stuff. We appreciate it. But we know why you're here. It's not to look at our faces or to hear our voices talk about things that aren't Marvel. So, Dave, we last week did our first part of the MCU Ultimate Rankings. We got more than 40 lists submitted, including ours. And it has brought us to this point where we are going to dive into the top 10 from that list. A pretty wide divide between 11 and 10. So I feel like it's a pretty appropriate snapshot of what the best movies are in the MCU.
Yeah, for sure. I think overall, these 10 movies you could put on at any point during the day and I'd be happy. Obviously, I prefer some over others, but I think when you look at it overall, the people got it right. I think the snapshot that we have here of the top 10 are some of the best movies. They're the most important movies. They're the most enjoyable movies. So I think they got it. I think everyone got it right. So I think by the end we sifted out kind of the outliers, and I think these 10 that we're left with are the best 10.
I agree. And a little recap before we dive into the top 10 here. Number 23 was The Incredible Hulk. Number 22 was Thor: The Dark World. Number 21 was Iron Man 2. Number 20 was Iron Man 3. Number 19 was Ant-Man and the Wasp. Number 18 was Thor. Number 17 was Avengers: Age of Ultron. Number 16, Captain America: The First Avenger. 15, Captain Marvel. 14, Ant-Man. 13, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. 12, Doctor Strange. And 11, Spider-Man: Far From Home. So, Dave, without further ado, are you ready to dive into the top 10?
Let's do it.
Well, Dave, last week we ended the episode talking about Spider-Man, and this week we're going to begin the episode talking about Spider-Man. At number 10 is Spider-Man: Homecoming. This had 630 points. That is 128 points more than Far From Home, which is number 11. So, yes, they're right next to each other, but not really. It did not get any first place votes. Actually, it's the highest rated movie on this list that did not get a first place vote. So really a symbol of consistency that people generally like Spider-Man: Homecoming. And I love this movie. I think Tom Holland is the best Spider-Man. I won't be taking any doubters to that. He's phenomenal. I think the title is one of the best in the MCU because it works on so many levels. Obviously, the homecoming dance is central, but it is Spider-Man's literal homecoming to Marvel because Sony and the MCU, like they never really crossed over. They've had their own thing for a while, and it was so incredible to see him in Civil War, which we'll get to in a little bit, and then in Spider-Man: Homecoming in his own movie. And Tom Holland's just done such a phenomenal job with the character. He's just meshes so well with what Peter Parker represents. So I love this movie.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is, if you look at the movies that are on this list, I think this is one of the lighter movies. Obviously, like you can throw movies we'll talk about later, but you can throw some other movies in that pot. But Homecoming is on FX a lot. It's on TV a lot, and I think it's one of those movies where I think is really, really enjoyable to sit down and rewatch. Not everyone can be rewatched. Like sometimes some of these movies are really, really good, but you don't always want to rewatch them. I feel like I could almost always watch Spider-Man: Homecoming just because it's so light and fun. It has a bunch of action scenes. Tom Holland, I agree with you, best Spider-Man. I just enjoy his interactions with characters on the screen. I enjoy the dynamic of him really kind of being a better Peter Parker than Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield were. And I just think overall, I like Michael Keaton in this movie. I think this movie just works so well in just so many places, and I really, really enjoy it. I had it a little bit higher. I think I had it at 6. So definitely
we both had it 6th on our list. So the people are a little bit lower on this movie than we are. But you'll notice, Dave, a theme here among the top 10 movies, with the exception of maybe only one of them, all have really good villains. Like that's a hallmark of what makes an MCU movie brings into that elite tier. Does it have a great villain? And there aren't too many top tier villains in the MCU, but these movies definitely have one. I love Vulture. I think Michael Keaton does a fantastic job.
Yeah, and you really, I think this movie does a really good job of like feeling the emotions that Tom Holland goes through. Like when he's in the car on the way to the dance and her dad figures it out, Michael Keaton figures it out who he is.
Yeah.
And it's just that eerie like trade-off. Like, I just saved your life. What do you say? And he said, like, thank you. And it's just like, it's so eerie and like you can feel the tension. Like you cut it with a knife. Yeah, it's just bone chilling the way he responds to it.
And and I think to this point in the MCU, the biggest jaw-dropping moment in this movie, when he knocks on Liz's door and it's her dad. Her dad's the Vulture. And you know what? Like every time there's twists in movies that like you watch it again, you're like, I should have seen this coming. Like I should have known this was gonna happen. And every time I watch it, I'm like, I should have known that was gonna happen. But sure enough, it did. It did happen. It's great. It's a great twist. I love Spider-Man: Homecoming. I think it definitely belongs in the top 10. So kudos to the people for getting it right. Dave, moving on. Like I said at the end of the last episode, really tight grouping here, 10 through 7. Really 10 through 6, actually. Coming in at number 9, only 25 points ahead of Homecoming. But, Dave, I would argue what put it over the top is the 2 first place votes that it got, and that is Iron Man, the original, the OG MCU movie, Iron Man. Robert Downey Jr. launching the MCU into billions and billions of dollars of revenue. I I can't. Let me see where we put this movie. I opened the wrong document. That's not going to help. There it is. So you had it number 11. I had it number 16. So I am a little lower on Iron Man than most people are. I just think it's a good movie, and the MCU struggles with origin stories for the most part, especially solo superhero origin stories. And if you're putting it up against all the other solo origins, it's probably the best. I mean, I think it's better than First Avenger, Captain Marvel, Thor. Probably better than the Incredible Hulk, I would say. It's like neck and neck with that masterpiece. But I think it's a good movie. It's a good movie. It's definitely a great place setter for the rest of the MCU, and it's really one of the few, maybe one of the only two movies in this top 10 that, or maybe the only, depending on how you look at one of the ones we'll talk about later, bad villain. Like Obadiah Stane kind of sucks. Ironmonger, not really that great. It's really just Tony Stark literally building up to what he becomes. And Ironmonger is just kind of there to move that story along. So overall, a good movie. Don't get me wrong. I mean, 16th on my list. It's still a really good movie, but overall, just doesn't hit me the same way the other ones do.
Yeah, for me, I think it gets more points just for being like the first in the line of really great movies, and I think it gets a boost from like if Iron Man is not good, if this is not a good movie, and RDJ is not a good Iron Man, who knows what the MCU becomes at that point? I mean, this was a trial run for all intents and purposes. This is a trial run. So I think for that reason, it definitely has a lot more cachet. But when you look at it, there's a lot of problems with it. Like you said, not a great villain. They had to recast Terrence Howard for anyone can guess. There's a number of reasons why they'd want to, but there's. I
think money was the main reason.
Yeah, I personally don't really like him that much in this movie.
He's all right.
Yeah, I just think like overall when you look at it, it's sort of like this movie. It's like we talked about other movies. This movie's fine. Like I like RDJ a lot as Iron Man. You mentioned it too. You hit it on the head. They struggle with origin stories. This is another one here. I just wasn't in love with this movie. I put it at 11 because, like I said, it gets a little bit of a boost because of how important it is to all the other stories. That it was a solid foundation, and I think it is that. I just don't think I can go above that. That's why I put it outside the top 10.
Yeah, it's a good point. And I stress, like, I mean, I know it's kind of a cop out to say solo origins, but like, yeah, it's a little different. I mean, there's one they struck gold with that we'll talk about later, but I think people know what we're talking about. But Iron Man's good. It's a good movie. It's a good movie. I wouldn't go much farther than that. I get people who love it. It did get 2 first place votes after all. I mean, if you're a big Iron Man fan, you're going to love this movie because it's by far the best Iron Man movie. Like, by far. Close. It's not even close. Anyway, moving on, Dave. We just covered number 9. Moving on to number 8. This one only came out 5 points ahead of Iron Man. This was got 1 more first place vote, which arguably put it over the top. Coming in at number 8 on the countdown. That's the wrong movie. Ignore that. Coming in at number 8 is the 2012's The Avengers. I love this movie. I think this is a really good movie. They had built up all of Phase 1 getting to this point, and the fact that it led to such a great payoff, it's really a harbinger of what the MCU would become, building up through the phase to get to a really good movie for the most part. It was number 9 for me. It was number 12 for you, so you're a little bit lower on it, which means that everybody else was higher than we were on this movie, which is understandable. I mean, it's a great movie. Loki's a great villain. It is a little bit slow to start off, but all the action is fantastic. The New York invasion is incredible. The team up, the circle up, the I'm always angry. 2 of the best moments in the MCU still, 8 years later with all the movies we've gotten since. It's incredible. I love The Avengers. I have no argument with it being on number 8 on this list.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I had it at 12, but I really enjoyed it. If I had to do it over, I would put this above Iron Man probably. I would still put them like back to back, so I wouldn't put it in the top 10, but that's just a preference thing. I really enjoyed this movie a lot. Having all the heroes in a group for the first time on screen for the first time together, the payoff was obviously amazing. the the visuals were amazing. The action was amazing. I mean, certainly, I don't think. I think the cool thing about this movie is how important it was, and also how much better like the next Avengers movies were. Like each movie, it feels like got better, and I think it takes something for them to be better is really crazy because this movie is such a really it's a really good story. And um, the New York invasion I think is one of my favorite overall moments in film in this whole MCU. Just the whole way it was played out, the characters, the script, everything, the visuals, like it was just such a really good part of the movie, and I really enjoyed it. But I don't think that it's nearly as um, enjoyable for me as the movies I had in the top 10. I think it's just outside the top 10.
Yeah. I think it's right around there. Obviously, it's number 8 here, number 9 for me. So I'm a little bit lower than most people, but I agree. I think it definitely belongs in the top 10 at the very least. Right in this crop of movies, I would say it's very good. It's a good team up. I know that it's a little bit slow in parts, a little bit of a slower burn here and there, but overall the action is very strong, and the script's pretty good. Before Joss Whedon went crazy with Age of Ultron, and again, I know he's not the greatest person, so I don't want to make it seem like he's a genius. Definitely not making it seem like that. The Avengers is a good movie. So, excuse me, unfortunately, I have to get after words. Josh Whedon, if you're listening, be nicer. That's what I gotta say. Anyway, moving on, Dave, to number 7. This was actually only 5 points ahead of the Avengers. It only got 1 first place vote, so 2 fewer first place votes than the Avengers. So it's more consistently ranked on people's lists. So coming in at number 7 is Black Panther. Another movie with a great villain, a great story, and a phenomenal lead actor. The MCU, we've talked about it a little bit, but they have just been so on the nose with their casting for the most part, and that's what makes a difference a lot of the time. And Chadwick Boseman, rest in peace, obviously, as T'Challa, incredible, just incredible casting. He is such a fantastic actor. He brought the right amount of gravitas, the right amount of sly comedy here and there, and he felt like a king. Like he really brought that stoicism to the role. It's incredible. It's a great movie. I'm a little bit lower on it than most people are. Let me pull up the rankings here. I should have them right here. Again, I keep pulling up the wrong document. But anyway, there they are. I had this number 10. Dave, you had this number 7. So you're right on the nose with the people. And I am a little bit lower. But again, this is a great movie. And I've rewatched it a few times. Every time. Like there's just so many good action set pieces. My thing is it's a little too much of a slow burn in parts. It's just a little too much dialogue here and there. But Killmonger's great. Michael B. Jordan's fantastic. It's overall just a very solid movie, and one that it's unfortunate we're not going to get a sequel with Chadwick Boseman, because really wanted to see. He would probably have become the leader of the Avengers, but it's probably going to fall to Doctor Strange or Spider-Man now, or depending on what happens with Scarlet Witch or something like that. But just such tragedy all around, because this movie showed such promise for what was to come. And I know we just said they struggle with origin stories, but Ryan Coogler was on a different level with this one. I mean, this is among the solo origin stories. I know I said Iron Man, but I had a complete brain fart. This is definitely the best one. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, this is one of the ones I really enjoyed watching. Just I thought the suit was amazing too. The graphics they used for the suit, I thought the suit was just incredible. Chadwick Boseman, one of the better actors of our generation. The guy could do anything with a smile on his face, and everything he did was pretty much bulletproof. There was just nothing that he could do that you could tear apart. He was just phenomenal in every role. Serious, comedy, action, thriller, doesn't matter. He was amazing. It really sucks that we don't get to see him in anything else anymore. But also props to him for being able to do that and go through those problems while he was filming all these and still able to do that. Takes a lot. Ryan Coogler though really nailed this, and I think that's why people should have confidence in the second Black Panther even without Chadwick Boseman, because I think he's going to write another great script. This movie is so good for so many reasons, but that fight with Killmonger and Black Panther and Chadwick Boseman is just, it's so good. And I can understand having a little bit lower because the payoff at the beginning is a little slow. It sort of struck me kind of similar to how Batman Begins was so slow at the beginning. Obviously, Black Panther's payoff is significantly better, but it's just struck me in that sense. I think that this movie, if it was a little bit faster at the beginning, kind of like in the between the beginning and the middle, there was like that kind of lull. If that wasn't there, I think we're talking about this as like a top 2, top 3 movie.
Shout out Steve in the comments. Our buddy Steve Scott, friend of the podcast over at Small State Big Takes. Big take, not MCU related. Didn't like Batman Begins. I can understand that. It's definitely the worst of that trilogy.
I didn't either. So
I don't think it's a big take at all. I think it's actually I like it, but it's the one I'll go out of my way the least to watch again.
There's a reason why Batman Begins is never on TV.
Now, Steve, Black Panther's number 7 on the list, not a 7th rounder. That would never be a 7th rounder. Definitely would get picked higher. In a movie draft, I'm sure. All right, let's move on here. We're getting to number 6, Dave, on the list. This one came out 15 points ahead of Black Panther, and I lied, actually. I lied to you, Dave. I'm so sorry. Spider-Man Homecoming, not the highest ranked movie without a first place vote. It was actually this one, which climbed to number 6 without a first place vote, which is absolutely incredible. That would be Captain America Civil War coming in at number 6. Like I said, 690 points, 15 points ahead of Black Panther. Really consistently rated on people's lists. On mine, it was number 5, and on yours, Dave, it was also number 5. So we were in lockstep on that one. People were a little smidge lower than we were on this movie, but overall, pretty consistent. I know people have had gripes with it before because of just kind of how it peters out at the ends, and the people argue about the stakes of the movie, and I think the stakes are pretty high because what happens in Civil War leads to Tony and Cap being apart at the start of Infinity War, so it's very consequential. It drives the Avengers apart, just like Daniel Bruhl wanted to do. I know that's the actor's name. Baron Zemo wanted to do. He'll come back in Falcon and Winter Soldier, so that'll be cool. But it's a really good movie. I love Civil War. I've always been higher on Civil War than a lot of people. It's one of the most rewatchable movies, I think, because there's not a lot of lulls in the movie. There's pretty much action every few minutes. Like, you might have to wait a couple minutes, but it's got a lot of action. It opens with an Avengers scene, with all of them kind of using their powers. And then, of course, it has the airport scene, which is I think we ranked one of the 5 best, or one of the 10 best MCU moments of all time. And that's one of the criticisms. Like, well, yeah, it's only got the airport scene, but like, it's got a lot more. That scene between Peter Parker and Tony Stark is maybe one of my low-key favorite scenes in the MCU, because I love when Peter makes that comment about, like, when when the bad things happen and I don't do anything, it's my fault. Like, if I can't, he has that mindset where the blame falls on him. And then obviously that gets reflected in Tony's eyes later on in Homecoming and Endgame, Infinity War, all those movies. But it's a great movie. I've always loved Civil War. I know I'm going long in the tooth here, but I love Civil War. But you know that, Dave.
I do too. I mean, we both had it at 5. I love this movie. And everyone's gonna, like you said, everyone's gonna say just as the airport scene. I would counter with what else does it need? Does it need a lot more? I mean, I know we're talking about great movies, so each thing you pull apart with the smallest cracks, you kind of magnify them. But I mean, the airport scene is like, it's one of the first moments you get literally every hero you can think of in one battle, and they're going against each other. So you legitimately get to see their powers against each other. I mean, it's a pretty cool angle to take when you're watching superhero movies. Like, we always talk about who would win in a fight. Like, we finally get answers to some of those questions. But overall, like, I just think this movie is so solid. And I don't know I can't remember. This movie isn't on TV that much, right? I feel like it's
on a pretty good amount. I feel like it's on TNT a lot.
I feel like Winter Soldier's on more.
I feel like the opposite, actually. I feel like Civil War's on a lot. It's First Avengers never on. That movie is never, ever on TV. For good reason, but It's never on TV.
I think
Yeah.
it had the Avengers. The first Avengers had a stretch where it was on like a couple weeks in a row, and then it just disappeared.
You know what movie is never on TV? So much to the point where I was shocked when I saw it was on last night. Is Thor: The Dark World?
Oh my god!
It wasn't. It was not only on TV; it was back to back, playing back to back. And I was like, you know what? I haven't seen this movie I have literally not seen that movie since I saw it in theaters. And I was like, let me see what I remember. I remembered nothing about that movie, like nothing. I remember the villain's name, and that was pretty much it. Like I remember the ether, obviously, is a very important part of it, but it's not a good movie. It's not.
I just I don't like Thor when he's not like this fun guy, like easygoing, carefree kind of guy. And those movies are too heavy for that. Like he doesn't fit in those movies yet. Like that's what I think Taika Waititi was perfect for Ragnarok. But then,
no, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, like, getting back to Civil War, it's just I feel like it's kind of well placed at the back half of the top 5, kind of the middle of the top 10, because I think people are right to point out some of the minor flaws that it has in relation to the top 5. Like the top 5 are, I mean, for me, pretty close to perfect movies. So I think when you look at it, it's hard to disagree with the list and names that are above this.
I agree. No, but I love Civil War. I think you put it perfectly. It's just a really solid movie. It's a great TV movie. You just sit down and let 3 hours waste away. So great in quarantine, especially. I might watch it later, honestly. I love this movie. Big take from Steve. Steve hasn't seen, oh my God, you haven't seen Civil War, Steve? Come on. He says Ant-Man was the most important pre-Endgame MCU movie. # Dr. Pym's time travel. I can't argue with that. It's very important. That's for sure. Anyway, Dave, moving on. We are heading headlong into the top 5. Going top 5 here. Pretty decent gap between these two. 33-point gap between 5 and 6. And if you liked Captain America Civil War, you'll probably like Captain America the Winter Soldier, which comes in at number 5. This one got, let me just check the old vote, got 6 first place votes. That was the third most first place votes for any movie in this entire MCU Ultimate Rankings, which is incredible. It only got as far as 5th, which just goes to show you how highly the people had the other 4 above it ranked. And that's actually funny. Emily's walking in right now. She'd be pissed. But yeah, Winter Soldier number 5, Dave. What do you guys say about Winter Soldier?
I love this movie. I think this is one of the rare movies for superheroes that if you weren't a superhero fan, you could watch this and you'd still want to follow along, because I think it has all the aspects of a really good thriller, sort of like a crime thriller. And this just, everything about it is just awesome. Like the action scenes are incredible. The characters are incredible. There's just so much to like about this movie. I actually think this is the last movie. No, I take that back. I watched Endgame, I think it was a week ago, and I watched Winter Soldier 2 weeks ago, I think. So this is one of the movies that's more fresh in my head. But I love everything about this movie. I love Bucky. I love Captain. It's just like that battle, the scene where they're going up. He's going up the stairs. It's just so fun. I love this movie, and I think I had it 8th.
We both have it 8th. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a little low, but I think it probably felt right judging the names ahead of it on my list.
Sean Clayton is watching this. Shout out, Sean. He's not pleased with it being 5th, so I'm sure he's not going to be happy that we both have it 8th. Emily's not happy either. But
he had it first, I think, right?
What was it? Yeah, it's number 1. He was one of the 6 first place votes. It would have been 7 if Emily submitted a ranking. But it's a great movie. It is a great movie. The only dig I have on it is it may not be the most fun movie to watch in the MCU because it's very gritty, has a lot of serious scenes in it. It's a great espionage thriller. I know that's kind of what comes with the territory of that subgenre, but it's not up there in terms of like, well, the next 4 movies we're going to talk about in terms of fun, but like even the Avengers, I think, is a more fun movie to watch. It's comparable to Black Panther in that respect. But yeah, so I love the Winter Soldier. I have no problem with it being in the top 5. I think it deserves to be in the top 5. I think enough people love it. It got 6 first place votes. We did 42 ballots, so one of every 7 that got submitted, people had it in first place. So I can't argue with it being that high.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think it fits perfectly where it is. Like, I wouldn't disagree with it if someone had it in the top 5. I personally wouldn't have it that high, but I wouldn't disagree if someone did.
Oh, show. All right, Dave, let's move into the top, number 4, top 4. Just going to keep saying the top, whatever. But the Mount Rushmore, so to speak, of MCU movies, according to our people here. This one, again, probably about the same margin between Winter Soldier and Civil War. This one was 25 points. I can do math. 35 points ahead of the Winter Soldier. It got 1 first place vote, count it, 1. But it was consistently ranked higher than Captain America, the Winter Soldier, and Civil War as Thor Ragnarok, which I would say this and the next movie, probably the 2 most surprising movies in the MCU in terms of quality. Like, I don't think people expected much out of a third Thor movie, because the second one we discussed last week is the second worst movie in the MCU. And the worst one that actually means a damn to the MCU itself. So not great that you're building off of that. But Thor Ragnarok is one of the most enjoyable viewing experiences in the MCU. It is an incredible sequel. And Taika Waititi, giving him the helm of the Thor series, completely changed. I would say one of the most consequential moves in the history of the MCU is letting Taika Waititi direct this movie.
Oh, for sure. I think, like you said, they gave a third Thor movie, and I don't think anyone was really super excited. I mean, people like superhero movies just because of superhero movies, but I don't think the excitement was extremely high for it. And I think he revitalized the character and revitalized that world to the point where we're going to get a 4th one now. And I don't think that would have been said, a couple of years ago before Ragnarok. When Ragnarok came out, what, 3 years ago?
It was 2017, so going on 4 years now.
Yeah, so I don't think people would be clamoring for it. And he brought a character that was kind of down a little bit. And like I said, picked him up. And all of a sudden now we're going to get Thor Love and Thunder. And I don't think I think that's one of the most look forward to movies of the next 5 years. Just because of who's directing it, the characters we're going to see in it. We've Natalie Portman coming back. I mean, there's a lot going on, and we owe that all to Taika Waititi. I mean, if he does not direct this movie, who knows what becomes of it?
Yeah, and it was hugely influential to Thor's scenes in Endgame and Infinity War. I mean, he was definitely in the room with with how his character was going to progress, and he was so dour, and it was like such a Shakespearean feel to it in the first 2, and that's fine. I mean, well, Kenneth Branagh directed the first one, so of course there was going to be a Shakespearean feel to it, but that's fine. It's just you needed to take the character in a different direction because he had to change. I mean, he's gone through so much loss. There's no way he's going to be the same person. So it's an incredible job by Taika Waititi, and so many great scenes in the movie. I mean, the scene with Hulk in the Coliseum, absolutely phenomenal. He's a friend from work, which is actually, I don't know if you know this story, Dave. There was I don't know if it was a Make-A-Wish kid or there was a kid on the set that day who recommended that line, like ad-libbed it. And Thor and Chris Hemsworth was like, "That's brilliant! Like, it's incredible! Like, that's incredible! That's awesome! Like, what a great line! He's a friend from work. That's awesome!" But it's such a great scene. And then Hela is also a great villain. Cate Blanchett. The fact like her getting in the MCU is incredible. Like, I don't know how they get all these prestige people. Honestly, like Anthony Hopkins and Cate Blanchett in this movie, ridiculous. And then you get the Doctor Strange cameo, of course. That was a nice little crossover. It was teased, I believe, at the end of Doctor Strange. But it's really good. It's an incredible movie. Fantastic. Definitely belongs in the top 4. I would have no problem if it was this or the Winter Soldier at number 4. I think they're similar in stature, in quality.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I tend to lean towards this because I think it's more of a fun movie and it has a lot of different elements to it that are important later on. I mean, part of the reason Hulk is the way he is in Endgame and Infinity War is because of this movie. So there's multiple layers that come from this movie, and I think there's a lot of humor in this, and I was not expecting that from this movie. I was not expecting it to be as funny as it was. And I'm not saying it's a comedy and it's like, this outrageously funny movie, but there's just enough to take that edge off the movie, and I think that adds to it. And it's so well written. It's such a fun watch. It's one of the movies I'd rewatch without question easily. Like it's similar to Homecoming. I think it's one of the more light movies, probably third on the list for that in that category.
It's literally got a lot of bright colors too. Like
Yeah,
very brightly colored. They got the rights to Immigrant Song, and they let you know it because it's used a lot. The fight on the Rainbow Bridge is fantastic. Tessa Thompson's really great as Valkyrie. The scene where she gets inside of, or Loki gets inside of her head is great. I remember watching it the first time. I really didn't I liked her character and her performance, but like I hated the character because she was really like detestable, and it was a great performance because that was obviously what she was aiming for, and then she redeems herself. It's just a great movie overall. I mean, there's not enough you can say about it. You just have to see it, and it's right from the jump. You can tell it's a different tone because there's him talking to the skeleton in the cage, which is you don't see it until the camera pans, which is fantastic. I love that Taika Waititi set the tone immediately and said like this is not what you're used to for Thor, so it's going to be different. And I'm so happy because everything we had seen before, it was such an incredible departure. So thank goodness for Taika Waititi.
Yeah, and you're playing your character's strengths too. Like Chris Hemsworth has that ability and like the chops to do it. Like not every character can pull it off. Not every actor can pull it off, but he has the ability to do it. And because of that, he created a movie that is sitting at number 4 on our list. I mean, that out of 23 movies, that he created a movie that's in the top 4. That's pretty incredible accomplishment considering where the other 2 movies are.
Yeah. Considering the other 2 are, I think it's 17 and 22. Not an incredible accomplishment. Thank goodness for Taika Waititi. All right, Dave. Not a big jump. Really close between number 3 and 4 here. It was only 17-point difference. This got 4 first place votes. Coming in at number 3, maybe until a couple of years ago was my favorite MCU movie. It's still one of my favorite movies of all time. That's Guardians of the Galaxy, which came out in 2014. And I would say, Dave, what would you say was a bigger surprise? How great this movie was or how great Thor Ragnarok was? Because it's different because Thor at least was a known property, even if the first 2 movies were so underwhelming. But this was such a gamble because who's even heard of it? Like this comic's a deep cut for big fans of like Marvel, and they took this and made it a multi-billion-dollar property. Like I don't know what's more surprising. So I want to see what you say.
That's a really, really tough question. Personally, like when I saw the preview for Guardians, the trailer, I thought it was gonna absolutely suck. I thought it was a joke. Like I was like, this, I can't believe that they're making this. Like this looks so stupid. What do we? And if I had to pick the one I was more surprised about, I would probably say Thor Ragnarok, just because of the fact that my expectations for Thor were so low, and I just didn't really think that highly of any of his movies. And I was curious what they were even going to do with him for a third movie, if they're going to make one. I didn't know if they would. And I think with Guardians, the part of the fun is the fact that how funny it is and how like funny the characters are together. And that kind of did come through on the trailer a little bit, where you could say, all right, this movie might suck, but it's probably going to have some funny lines in it. I think Thor Ragnarok, you went in and really had no idea what you were expecting.
Yeah, that's true. I would say Guardians was a bigger surprise for me. This came in before I forget to look it up. This was number 2 for me, and it was number 3 for you. And it was number 3 on this list. So we're pretty much in lockstep on this one. It's such a great movie. It's probably the best origin story they've told. I mean, maybe Black Panther is better. It's definitely like one of those 2, unless you like Iron Man better, which is totally understandable. But Guardians is just it just makes you feel good. I can't really describe how it makes me feel to watch the movie because it was the movie that made me fall in love with the MCU. The Come and Get Your Love montage at the beginning where he's walking on Morag and he's going to get the Power Stone. It's one of my favorite scenes in the MCU. There's no action really. It's just him singing and dancing, but it set that vibe for what it was going to be. And there really was no other MCU movie like that to this point. You got Winter Soldier and you got Iron Man 3 and the Avengers, and they're kind of darker tone movies and a lot of high stakes. And there's obviously high stakes in this movie, but it felt like it was the first MCU movie played for laughs. And that was a big gamble for them because they decided to do that with a completely unknown property. So the Kevin Feige, the gall to do it, and they knocked it out of the park. It is one of the best movies they've ever made. Obviously, if it's number 3 on this list. People love it. People love this movie, and there's no reason not to. The soundtrack's fantastic. Chris Pratt is hysterical. Zoe Saldana, Dave Bautista, Vin Diesel, who has the plum job, like the most plum job in the world. And then Bradley Cooper might be the most unsung hero in the MCU. Like, he is hysterical as Rocket, and the voice is perfect. It just goes back to the casting. They did such a great job with it.
Yeah, it's sort of like when you forget how famous some of the people in the MCU are, and you're like, oh, like maybe they can get this person for this role, and you remember like, oh yeah, Bradley Cooper is literally a raccoon, and you think about it, and you're like, one of the biggest movie stars in the world right now is a raccoon, and it makes you think of like how important these character roles are and how well they do casting them, and like to get someone like of Bradley Cooper or anyone really that they've gotten to play along in a role that's really not a major role. Like it technically is because he's technically one of the 5 major characters, but realistically, he's one of the side characters when it's all said and done. And that's pretty amazing in and of itself. But this movie is just so different. And I think that's what's refreshing about it. It's just so different. And like you said, for him to do this, Kevin Feige, it just like incredible because he had a formula that worked, like to be able to have a system where people like it. Like you don't have to stray from that script. He did anyway and improved the movies for everything. So props to him, but this is just an absolutely fantastic movie.
Yeah. That's about all. You said it better than I ever could. Kevin Feige, props to you. I know he listens. I know he's a big fan. So thank you, Kevin Feige, for listening. We appreciate that. And great job with the movie. If you ever need help with one, just give us a buzz. We can help.
He usually calls after the pod to give us notes. So
That's true.
Yeah, we can talk to him then.
He called last week after the pod. You know what he said? 2 words. You know what he said?
What?
No notes. And I was like, Kevin, that's the kindest thing I've ever heard. I mean, just coming from you.
He actually called, and he actually called last week too and mentioned that he was glad they didn't have to that Hulk was last because he didn't have to get it on Disney Plus. He was happy about that.
Right, exactly. And he thanked us for talking it down because then the people were clamoring for the Incredible Hulk, and they were like, we listened to Crossing State Lines, and they told us it was bad, and the people who submitted lists said it was bad. So the call stopped. So Kev, we call him Kev. You're welcome. Anyway, moving on, Dave, to number 2. Don't think I need to tell people there was a very wide gap between 2 and 3, almost 90 points between the two of them, 88 to be exact. Got 9 first place votes, the second most, obviously, on the list. Coming in at number 2 is Avengers Infinity War. 2018's Avengers Infinity War. Dave, I feel like we always knew it was going to come down to these 2 movies. At least that was my prediction in my head. I was like, maybe Guardians will sneak in, maybe Winter Soldier, Ragnarok, but they are inevitable, to paraphrase a future quote. But literally a future quote. But I mean, Infinity War is incredible. Infinity War, Emily doesn't like Infinity War, but we don't need to get into that. Emily and I saw Infinity War on a whim one night. Back when going out and just hanging out and doing things and going to the movies was still a possibility. We saw Infinity War on a whim in a small theater down in South Kingstown in Rhode Island. That was the theater that a lot of URI people would go to, Dave. You probably know what I'm talking about. Yeah. You just got in the live stream. Say hello to the people.
No,
okay.
Dave
says hello. We're not cutting any of that. Anyway, we saw it on a whim, like I said, small theater, and it was a great experience. It was a tiny theater. Not like the experience we have for number 1, Dave, but The opposite, quite. I love Infinity War. It up Vulture was before, but like this is way up. The biggest jaw drop in the MCU, without a doubt, was the snap. I mean, I think it was number 3 on our scenes countdown. I think it was behind Wakanda and another scene we'll get to. Thor landing Wakanda and another scene that we'll get to in a few minutes. But the snap blew me away because you knew something was going to happen. It was 2 parts, so you knew something was going to happen. But it was almost like you ever see the meme that goes around? It's like, what are you going to do? Stab me? Says man who was stabbed. You ever see that meme go around? That's pretty much what I was like. What are you going to do? Kill everybody? Like, what are you going to do? Kill the big people? And you knew there were stakes. People were going to die. But seeing who dusted away I still have that memory of the first time I saw Bucky Barnes just go, Steve, and then he turns and he dusts away, and I'm like, oh, this is gonna be bad. And then like they're all so dumbfounded, and they can't comprehend that they lost, and it's crazy because you don't expect them to lose. They're the Avengers, like they don't lose. They might lose a battle, but not a war. I guess you could say this was kind of like that, but way bigger. Literally, they lost the war, and it blew me away. The movie itself and that scene. So I know they obviously brought him back, but props to Marvel for just saying, you know what, we've taken it this far. We might as well just take the wind out of our audience.
Yeah, this movie was, I saw this and I had no idea what was coming, and the snap just completely like put me in like a trance. I couldn't even get out of the seat. I was like so stunned what happened. But you're so used to at the end of the movie, like the heroes win. That's just like what we're led to believe at this point. The heroes don't lose. Like at the end of the movie, they'll find their way. And then you see the snap and you're like, oh my God, what just happened? And then you see Black Panther fade away. You see Star-Lord fade away. You see Spider-Man fade away. And you're like, these are like big people. These aren't like minor characters. It's not like Groot and, Rocket fade away. Like, and Rocket actually survives. But it's like, it's not that degree. And you're thinking, and you're sitting there and you're like, oh my God, what just happened? But the movie was just, and especially like after Thor comes back, you're like, oh, well, now they can't lose. They got Thor. He's crazy. I mean,
now yous can't leave. That's how, that was the feeling you had when he landed on Wakanda, which is just, to that point, the best scene in the MCU by far. Like that, like your eyes are like popping out of your skull at that point when he lands on Wakanda. Stormbreaker just starts mowing down Chitauri, and it returns to him, and it's a lot of great moments after that. This is my friend Tree. He says, I am Groot. I am Steve Rogers. But man, it breaks your heart with the Mr. Stark. I don't feel so good. What's happening to me? You're gonna be okay. You're gonna be okay, kid. Oh, dude, that's brutal. It's brutal. And then his last words are, "I'm sorry." Oh, it's awful. The first thing after that movie, the first thing you think, other than, oh my God, what did I just watch? The first thing you think is like, all right, well, who's left alive and how are they going to fix this? Because obviously Ant-Man and Hawkeye weren't in the movie, and they become integral to Endgame. But it is just incredible to watch play out. And that was, to that point, the longest year of waiting in our lives. How blissfully unaware we were at that point. But that was a long year waiting for the resolution to that plot. And we got Ant-Man and the Wasp, whatever, but that was a long time waiting for that. Long time waiting.
It's just, it's one of those things where I think that wait was worse than this one, just because we had seen what had happened, and like we needed answers. Like we needed to know how long. Like remember when we were sitting here and we were like, I wonder how long this movie's gonna be. I wonder what the title of the movie's gonna be. I want to see the first trailer. Like I must have watched the first trailer that we talked about 150 times, 200 times, and it's the same 2 minutes, and it's barely anything. And when you watch the movie, it's just, man, it's Infinity War just set up everything so perfectly, and it's just such an amazing movie. It's a masterpiece, and I think the coolest thing is you get to see how powerful Thanos was. Like there's literally like 7 of them holding him down, trying just to get the glove off, and they can't. They can barely do it.
yeah, like they need Mantis to like put him out in order to get that thing off, and they almost do. But I thought you were going to mention how he doesn't even use the Power Stone, and he just like knocks out the Hulk.
Yeah.
Like doesn't even bother using the stone, and
Yeah.
so much to the point that Ebony Maw is like let him have his fun, and he just beats the shit out of the Hulk. It's wild. It's wild.
Yeah, it's the first time we've ever seen the Hulk like lose a strength battle. Ever. And it's just you're reminded by just how powerful this guy is, just how impressive he is. It's amazing.
It's phenomenal. It's phenomenal. I can't say enough good things about Avengers Infinity War. Check it out because we just spoiled the whole thing. But if you haven't seen it, sorry. I don't know why you're listening to this if you haven't seen it. But run, don't walk to go see it. Moving on, Dave. There's no surprise left, but 36 points ahead of Infinity War, 14 first place votes, which means that I believe, if my math is right, 1 out of every 3 people had this number 1 on their list. We were 2 of them. That is Avengers Endgame. 879 points. It wasn't particularly, it was kind of close. It was like a game that ends with a team winning by 10 points in football. Like it was, yeah, like it looks close, but it really wasn't that close. I mean, we could do, we've already done a whole episode of Avengers Endgame. We've done multiple episodes, I'm pretty sure, of Avengers Endgame. It is a masterpiece in an achievement in filmmaking that they tied up 21 movies worth of storyline in this film, and they did it masterfully. The Russo brothers did an incredible job. They brought so many people together. So many people came back for it, and it just felt like a great party celebrating the end of something. There was a lot of fan service, of course. Who cares? Cap wielding Mjolnir just gasps in the theater. The portal scene you could spend a whole segment on. I mean, that's what we talked about in the scenes episode. I think that was our number 1 with good reason, because the static starts, you hear the static, and then you hear on your left, and people just went nuts. Like that, at that point, you're like, all right, like we thought we've seen the best of this movie so far, and we haven't, like not even close. It is such a phenomenal conclusion to the saga, and not to mention, it is the quickest 3 hours of your life. Like, it is 3 hours long, and it feels like it zips by. Like, Wonder Woman 1984 felt twice as long as Avengers Endgame, and it was a half hour shorter. It's that movie. I think we said it last year, Dave. It could have been 5 hours, 6 hours. I would have seen the whole. I would have sat through the theater, and I would not have left my seat. Like, it's just fun. I can't say enough good things about Endgame. It's just such a well put together piece of filmmaking, and they put it in the right hands with Marcus and McFeely, the screenwriters, and obviously the directors, the Russo brothers. It's hard, even with all those movies as backstory, it's hard to put all this into one movie, and the fact they were able to do that in 3 hours, remarkable. It's just remarkable.
Yeah, it's just insane how great this movie was, and we even joked around like, if this was 6 hours, okay, it's 6 hours, cool. Just means we have to get there earlier. And I mean, it's just such an amazing movie all around. There's just so much that happens, and I know there's a lot of people that kind of rip it apart like little strings and tug at the strings, and good for them. But like this movie is just, it means a lot, and to see. I think the coolest thing was at the beginning, like them failing, and you see, and you're like, okay, like where do we go now? It's only been like 40 minutes. Like, where do we go for the next 2 hours and 20 minutes? Like, what is next?
It really is. It's almost insulting. It's not, but it is almost insulting that we waited so long for that first trailer of Endgame, and literally everything in that first trailer is from the first like 15 minutes of the movie.
Yeah.
Like everything. It's like they like make it out like it's this big mission they're gonna go on, and it's like, oh my god, like what's this gonna be? There were new rock stars videos breaking it down that I watched. I'm like, what are these little things supposed to mean? And it was like this is the opening of the movie.
Yeah.
It's like, come on, man, seriously? Like, come on. And then like we knew that going into it after in more trailers, and we were like, well, that's definitely not the end of the movie. There's more coming. But oh my god, dude, this is an I don't know if I've ever told anybody but you this, Dave, but you know this. And it's almost embarrassing, but I was so excited for that second trailer of Endgame that I went to the gym that day. Gyms, for people who may not know, they used to be these things you'd go to without a mask and you'd be able to sweat around other people. It's incredible that they allowed that at one point. But I went to the gym. I ran on the treadmill for like 20 minutes or something. And literally all I did was watch that trailer over and over again. All I did for that 20 minutes or whatever. And I was like, it got me so pumped up. Yeah, Emily's looking at me like she's going to throw me out of the house. B, it's a great trailer. I mean, come on. They got that scene at the end of the whatever it takes thing, and you see Tony Stark, you're like, oh my God, he's back. Like, what are they going to do? And Emily's still looking at me. Yeah, but I know. But it's just, it was so worth the wait. And that was the only concern I had was I know it's going to be good. Like I was pretty convinced it was going to be good or great. But I was like, I hope it's worth the wait. Because I was like, Davey, like 1 month, like 2 months, 3 months. Like, oh, 6 months, 5 months, 4 months. Like, oh, it's like 3 weeks because we saw it together. I saw it in theaters like 4 times, but we saw it opening night, you, me, and Emily, over at the packed Showcase Cinema in Warwick East Greenwich line, on the Warwick East Greenwich line. It was a great experience. We got there early. Somebody didn't let us know the theater opened already, and then we barely found 3 seats together. Yeah. And I was like, hey, like, oh, I think the theater's open. And we like ran in there, like, oh my God. I was like, wait, I go to the bathroom, somebody go save us seats. I was like, all right, well, thankfully we got 3 great seats. And then, of course, I made a fool out of myself when the hammer started to float, and I leaned over to Emily, and I was like, it's Vision. Oh my God, it's Vision. Like, how would it be Vision? Like, I was like, as soon as I saw Cap, like, the people around me must like tell that story to other people. Like, you won't believe what this idiot said during Endgame. And if they do, that's fine. I gave them great content. I'm happy about that. But yeah, Avengers Endgame, the time travel stuff, like, don't think about it too hard because time travel is not right. This might be a surprise. It's not real in the first place. So don't worry about it, how it works out. It doesn't matter anyway. And there were real stakes to it. I mean, Tony Stark dies. Captain America sort of dies. Like, he doesn't die on screen, but he's old. And yeah. But it's a great conclusion for everybody involved. I think if they really hit it on the head with everybody. So, just a masterpiece.
Yeah, I mean, I think going into it, we knew the contract situations of RDJ, Chris Evans, and Chris Hemsworth, and you could kind of feel which way they were all leaning. Like, you could tell RDJ and Chris Evans were pretty much done. They would reach their point. They were okay with moving on. And you felt like Chris Hemsworth was like non-committal on it. And at that point, after all those movies and appearances, if you're non-committal, it means you still want to do more. It's negotiation because you've done enough. You know where you stand. Like, you could feel the other one. So you kind of had an idea, but they still made it interesting on how they chose to let the characters ride off into the sunset, so to speak. Because, you know, Iron Man, for all of his great all the things he did in all those movies, he was always looked at, and even the first in Infinity War, Doctor Strange said to him, like, you're no, or I'm not sure it was that one, but his whole presence was, oh, well, until the cards are down, like, we don't know where you stand as far as, like, will you sacrifice for the team? Like, are you a team guy?
Yeah,
and,
that's yeah.
And, and he finally does. And, like, it's a very fitting way for him to go out because him doing something that he knew would not work out for him. Because everyone always looked at Chris Evans or Captain America as that guy, not Tony Stark.
If, like, the great thing about it too is, like, I know what you're talking about. It's a scene from, I believe it's from the Avengers, and it's the scene between Cap and Iron Man. And Cap says that Tony's not the guy to make the sacrifice play. Like, they'll never lay down on the wire and let a guy crawl over him or whatever. And then Tony shoots back that everything special about Cap came out of a bottle. And both of those come full circle 8 years later, or 7 years later, unless you count the MCU timeline. Then it's actually 11 years. You get the idea. But it all comes full circle. There, we realize that Cap actually is special. He's worthy of Mjolnir, so he's actually a special human being. He's not just an experiment. And then Tony obviously sacrifices his life for planet Earth and everybody else. So, yeah, you know what I mean, like billions and trillions of people. So it's the way they tied everything up in I know just 3 hours sounds like an oxymoron, but in just 3 hours, they were able to tie up 22 or 21 movies worth of stories, and they knocked it out of the park. Obviously, it's number one. I think this list proves it. I think all the outliers were kind of drawn out, and I think that Avengers Endgame being number one is definitely. It's been almost 2 years since it came out, so this isn't even recency bias anymore. This is just what people really love. So, yeah, I think I don't have a problem with it. It's great.
I agree. I had it first, and I built the list. Kind of started in the back, finished 4 or 5 of them that were obvious, then bumped up to the front, and did my top 5, and those were the ones that were the easiest for me. And this was one of the easy no calls, or no, that I have to think about. Rather, it's just I knew it was gonna be number one.
It was inevitable.
It was.
You see what I did there? So it's a line from the movie. And I am Iron Man. Anyway, it was inevitable. It was inevitable. But thank you, everybody who watched and listens and all that stuff. And hope you enjoyed our countdown. Thank you, everybody who submitted their lists. It was a blast putting it all together. Like I said, very few surprises overall. And Dave, thank you. Here's to 200 more, as Ken Border said on Twitter today. Shout out Ken B, MC Ken B. Yep. Here's to many more.
Absolutely, yeah. It's been a crazy 200 episodes, and it doesn't feel like it's been 200. It feels like we just started. So, hopefully 200 more, maybe even more than that. So, we still have a lot of great ideas coming, and we have a lot of great guests lined up. It's going to be a lot of fun.
For sure. For sure. And Dave, let me ask you, where can the people find you?
The people, if they are not sick of me yet, can find me at David_Albiani on Twitter.
Perfect. I'm at Jacob_Morocco. This podcast is CSL Podcast on Twitter. You can find us also at CSLpodcast.com. Go check us out there. We got some stuff coming out, I'm sure. Dave and I always churning the gears of our minds, so be ready to see what we got next. Also, you can find us on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Pocket Casts, Pod something else. I think we're at CastBox as well. Yeah, we are. A lot of different places, so go check us out there, especially on iTunes. Like, rate, subscribe, 5-star, do all that fun stuff. It'd be really helpful if you could. We would love it. I know Dave would love it. He would smile, and Dave's got a radiant smile, so people always want to see that. Look at those chompers right there. I can even see his face. I know he's smiling. But yeah, so go check us out there, and we will see you guys later in the week or next week, whenever we'll see you next. Let me end the broadcast here. Thanks for watching, everybody.